I think I was really interested in this because I've watched a lot of World War II films. I've been in quite a few World War II films, but I'd never seen a film that's directly dealing with this, the aftermath of a conflict and how on earth you physically rebuild cities and countries and nations, but actually also rebuild yourself after going through such trauma. So I think I was interested in all those questions and interested in the fact that I'd never asked myself that before, that actually when you think about that generation, you think about the conflict, you think about the winners and the losers and, you know, this triumph over evil, but you never think about what it must have taken to rebuild and forgive and move on. And it's a film, I think, that deals with all of that on a very personal level, but equally on that sort of political level.
That it just picks it up at a non-traditional point. That, you know, the film begins at the end of the Great War, and in those couple of months afterwards, where it's chaos and where this nation is defeated and conquered, and are so clearly in the wrong, you know, on the bad guy, to paint it with a certain brush, but yet have nothing, you know, are broken, are destroyed, you know, and are in the hands of others and hands of the victors who have suffered a lot from it. And a guy like Lewis is, you know, in charge of feeding them, putting them back on their feet, you know, and we now know that Germany becomes the Germany that it is today. You can't imagine, you know, the Germany it was at the end of 1945. And then that reflected within a relationship of a man and a wife who have lost a son and have not come to terms with that, you know, and will never come to terms with that, but they might even then lose each other.
I think it's impossible not to empathise with this character, whether you are a mother or whether you aren't. You know, I mean, I think absolutely my view of the world and the way that I play characters and the way I see characters is different since being a mother, because motherhood pretty much changes you fundamentally, so you can't not see the world differently and therefore see the characters differently. But that's not to say that somebody who doesn't have a child couldn't empathise with this person or play this person.
Well, it's a family story originally. My grandfather was a governor in Pinneberg outside Hamburg at the end of the Second World War. He made a very unusual decision, which was to share a house he'd requisitioned with the German family rather than throw them out and put them into billets. Had he not done that, we wouldn't be standing here now, because it led to a British and a German family sharing a house for 5 years. And that was the kernel, really, of my own novel. I thought about writing it as a memoir, but I didn't want to be beholden to the facts, if you like. I wanted to create my own story. So I wrote the book. I actually wrote the screenplay before I wrote the book. It has an unusual genesis. But essentially I was doing them in tandem. So I was thinking cinematically early, although I felt it was a novel first. And the process actually has been relatively seamless, because I was already thinking cinematically early in the sort of development of the story.
So I play a woman called Susan Burnham, who arrives at the end of the Second World War to Hamburg to meet her husband, along with Rachel, who is played by Keira. And we both arrive with some pretty heavy prejudices against the Germans, and Rachel is able to overcome those throughout the course of the film, but Susan doesn't quite manage that.
Stefan is a broken man when we first meet him. He lost his wife in the bombings of Hamburg in 1943. And in a way, he lost his daughter as well. She's still alive, but she can't stand him. She blames him for Claudia's, her mother's death. And now he's losing his home. It's being requisitioned. So he's a very proud man, and he tries to be gracious. And when this British couple show up to take his home, but it's magnanimous, but it's very difficult for him. He's fighting hard to keep it together.
Yeah, so I play Barker, who's a young Irish private, and is Lewis, played by Jason Clarke's driver and assistant. Yeah, as soon as I read it, I really loved it, and went back and read the book. Really beautiful book by Rhidian Brook, and yeah, and that's kind of how I ended up getting involved.
I think Keira Knightley is absolutely perfect for the role of Rachel, because she combines what she wanted, which was quite a slightly cool exterior at the beginning of the film because that's her character. And yet, as the film unravels, she becomes tender and empathic and open to what she's placed herself in, which is this alien environment that she has no knowledge of, the language, the house, the servants, and the devastating ruins that she sees.
It was amazing, you know. Jason and Keira are people who I've grown up watching, watching my whole life, and and really are reasons that I want to get involved in acting in the first place. What makes them so special, I think, is they're so talented. Obviously, are incredibly talented, and we've all seen their movies and are amazing. But also, they're so nice and so generous with their time, and both as performers and then just on and off set as well. They're really amazing, and that's a really cool thing to see as well. As like a young actor, that the cream really floats to the top in terms of both their performances and also just being really lovely people.
It was wonderful, and we got to spend a week or two here in London before we went over to Prague and Hamburg to shoot the movie, where we got to map out the relationship, and that journey was very exciting to both of us, because there's so much animosity there in the beginning, and how that love story through grief, in a way, that they understanding of the other person's sadness, and that they both have broken hearts. That kind of is the beginning of that connection, and to how that slowly builds was very interesting to explore with her.
Well, James is very painterly, sensitive director, and it needed that because there's a very sensitive moments in the film, as you would have seen, and he handled that intimacy and that subtly. I think it's a very elegant film, a grown-up film, as my daughter keeps telling me, and I hope that people will appreciate that.
He's incredible. You know, he's such a lovely man, and I was a big fan of his work, of Testament of Youth, and he's just so kind and really lovely. Just a really lovely man, and a brilliant director.
Yeah, it's incredibly important that Alexander Skarsgård and Jason Clarke had yin and yang, if you like, because they had. Stefan Lubert, the German, has to offer her something sufficiently different from her husband to tempt her away. And I think that's what Alexander has, because he's got a kind of gentleness. And Jason, who's amazing, has it's kind of more alpha in a way, and he's more raw as Lewis is. And remember, got to remember that Lewis, her husband, has gone through the war, 5 years of conflict. So he would have come out of that conflict with post-traumatic stress disorder, really.
You know, it's everything. We'd worked together as husband and wife, and it's a very intimate relationship, a man and a wife. They haven't seen it, Lewis and Rachel haven't seen each other for years. Lewis is afraid of his wife and her femininity and her instincts and her, and the way that she's seen the world now. It challenges everything that he's just been part of. He doesn't want to bring his work home or show her the death and the destruction, even though he's brought her to Hamburg. But that's the reality. So you need someone that just is going to challenge you and be there with you and have a laugh with you as well. But also, get it done.
Yeah, I think what she achieves in this film is totally outstanding. I can only speak from a personal experience. You kind of look for those challenges as an actor, and you really look forward to the opportunity to really invest in a role that has so many emotional arcs, and the character that she's playing in Rachel has that. She completely transforms as a character throughout the film.
Well, I think the importance to try to understand the other side and the humanity of the other side is something we can learn, and definitely take something and try to work on, because I feel that tribalism and partisanship is stronger today than it's ever been, and we're becoming more and more polarized in our society and in politics, and the fact that we don't we're not encouraged to have a conversation with the other side. Confirmation bias and sticking with your group is more important, and that creates a very divisive society.
I always start with the human. I think people are going to relate to the human, and then you can weave as much political or symbolic in as you can get away with. I mean, I am quite a political person, and this story has a political message. At a time of great nationalism, this is a story against nationalism. Whichever side of the divide you're on, whichever side of the divide in America you're on, this story should appeal to anyone who wants a kind of salutary reminder that we need to be responsible for our actions, and we need to work towards something that's a damn sight more positive than the direction we seem to be going at the moment.
It's a lost bit of history, really. We know about the Second World War, we know about the Cold War. There's this bit in the middle where a few countries were trying to rebuild a former enemy's country, and it was a massive effort, and a remarkable effort, really. And it's sort of from that, I guess you could say, a modern Europe was born out of those decisions that were made in that time. So when I wrote the story, I was not that familiar with that period myself, and was sort of stunned that there was so little written about it. So if this story exposes that to a wider audience, then I'll be happy.
I don't think there's a huge amount of films that take place where our film takes place, and maybe a lot of period films end where our film takes off. I think that I just personally, I kind of maybe was slightly naive to just the amount of destruction, in particular this film set in Hamburg, just the amount of destruction that Hamburg faced during the war and how it was left. So I think that audiences will probably find it quite shocking when they see just how destroyed it was and the effect it had on the city.
It's all just a gut feeling, really. I don't really have a strategy. It's often informed by what I've just worked on. If when I read something coming off a project, I try to find something that's tonally different and a character that's different from what I've just done, so that there's a sense of discovery, because that's kind of why I wanted to be an actor in the first place, because of that journey, the preparation, the finding a character. So that's I never know what I'm going to do next. It's always about like finding something that is right for me in that moment and that time.
When you write, you have ideas maybe, but the ideas change. I didn't think of those guys. That said, Keira in particular has delivered an amazing performance. She really owned that role. And in a way that's key, because Rachael is the character that carries the film, carries the through line really of the journey. And Jason also does a beautiful job, technically playing my grandfather. Keira's technically playing my grandmother. So I think I can't really complain about the cast, and they've done a beautiful job.
For me, it's a story of a marriage, which is, we're married screenwriters, and that was what drew us to the project in the first place. I think it's a story about you're dealing with the aftermath of a very, very virulent conflict, and I think the world that all these characters emerge into is a world where, okay, so we won, but now what? And I think that, if you're looking for a political angle, is exactly what is relevant about now, is that we have never been more divided, and yet this is a story about what unites us way more than what divides us. So I think that's the topical answer. The universal answer is that it's a story about a marriage, and it's a story about what makes us human, and it's a story about love and passion and the dark side of love, and what happens when love sours, and then can that ever be saved? So I think that even though it's very specific period of history, I feel that it's a universal story, and that's what drew us to it in the first place. I don't know whether you'd agree.
I totally agree. I think
it's easy.
Politically it has become quite interesting. You know, obviously we're living through an unknown time in terms of the way Europe is going to evolve. And this film is focused at a moment when we were trying to rebuild Europe and to unite Europe after the most catastrophic event. It's also, as Joe says, the story, the microcosm of that, the story of a marriage which has suffered the worst possible grief. And I found that, I think, the story playing out on those two levels very interesting and connected emotionally to it. And that's what we tried to do with the screenplay. And when we adapted Rhidian's novel, Rhidian had so much of that in there, and there were so many great ideas and plots and characters, and we had to just try and extract the DNA of what he was doing and make that work for a very narrow-shouldered beast, which is a movie.
Yeah, it was a bit painful. Yeah, I stood for a long time. No, but it was good. But that's the benefit of what we do. I get to meet these people and go to these places that you never get to. Sit in these mess halls that have been there since Waterloo. And you just go, wow, you can see the history of this country,
We were lucky enough to shoot half this film in Prague, where all the big ruins were done. Not that Prague's full of ruins, but there was a big empty ruined sugar factory nearby. And then, so that gave us the groundwork in order to create these massive ruins. And then on the other side, we have Hamburg, which has this beautiful interior, this house that was totally authentic, and we just needed to decorate it.
This was honestly, I think, the loveliest job that I've ever worked on, and it will always be in my memory as just the loveliest job, because James Kent is honestly the nicest man I've ever met, and Alexander Skarsgård is pretty much up there as one of the nicest men, and Jason Clarke, I love working with Jason so much. I've worked with him before. He's one of my favourite actors. I'm such a fan of his work. So just, again, that opportunity to kind of step into the ring with him and play was very exciting. So it really was a lot of fun.
Wonderful Field Marshal. Yeah, who had a big and prosperous career, and he served me a shepherd's pie out in his place. It was lovely. Jack set that up, And just meeting those old guys and him giving me a sense of, command of what it is to lead men, and it's a really interesting notion of, how do you command men? And Lewis had to command men and had to command, the population, and we had a wonderful afternoon with him telling stories and showing that how humour gets it done, how responsibility gets it done. It was just, you just kind of touch it. Well, I spent a day actually with the Royal Guard here, and they put me through the drill stuff, and that was pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah. These men have put their life into that. He's got 40 years of drilling. Teaching me how to punch it out and salute and walk. And I was just like, oh my God, good men though, really, good men and women which are very generous.
She is playing a character at a time when emotions weren't discussed very much, and she's gone through something that's unimaginable to most people. So she has to deal with immense grief with a man who she's married to but hasn't seen for 2 years. He has been through enormous trauma, having fought in the Second World War, and they've lived these terrible experiences separately. And so for her, it's a story about coming back to a marriage that has changed irrevocably. It's changed, and she has to learn how to live in that marriage again, and to live in a country which, frankly, is, when she first arrives in Germany, is full of her enemies. Her enemies have caused her the unimaginable pain she has suffered. So having to kind of accept that the people she interacts with in this country are actually human beings who've had their own experience and not just an enemy. I think it's a very interesting message for now, for obvious reasons. We are in a strange, polarized time, and I think observing each other as human beings is the most important thing we can do.
I think from our earliest conversations with Keira, she was fascinated to delve into the most unimaginable horror for a mother, which is part of her character. Yeah,
she'd just had a baby,
and so there was an incredible bravery.
I think it was the first part she played. I don't know this; you'd have to corroborate this, but the first part she played since having a child, and so we have 2 sons. So I think you do experience differently how you're going to play a mother who's lost a child, which is what's happened to her. So it was very interesting, the conversations we had with her at script stage, ideas she had, way she wanted to get into the character. We talked a lot to her about that, and she was just immaculate, I think. She's wonderful.
As a writer, that's all you hope for, is an actor who says, all right, great, let's take this, let's really take this plunge. She didn't want to hide from anything. She wasn't afraid to
get into the rawness of that experience, and she wanted to really go there, and that's what we tried to do for her. And I think she is amazing.
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe the first day, actually. Yeah, just the first day, because everything's so new and you're meeting so many new people. And yeah, and everyone was so lovely. And one thing that was really cool about that as well is that maybe something, I think I'd just come off an independent film before that was like a really low budget, and to see that just because the budget gets a lot bigger, everyone is still so nice and really caring.
I mean, there's some, we had some wonderful days. We saw each other on Everest, and that was when, I think I was stepping out to be a father. I'd come back now, and she's, when I met her daughter. It was, look, as an actor, there's lots of different things, but there's, on a personal level, it's lovely too, in this circus of people we haven't seen for years, of just connecting again, and you know each other, in this big wide world that, we've got history, and we've built more history now.
No, I don't want to watch any of it. No, I don't think about that at all. No. Isn't that terrible?
No, it's not.
Maybe I should be thinking, no, I think entirely about myself and what I'm interested in, yeah.
I think I'm quite good at letting go and when I'm not shooting, I'm not a method actor, so it's not like I have to stay in that kind of headspace for 3 months. The darker the project, the more important it is for me to, when I'm not shooting, have fun, get away, see friends, see family, see loved ones, because that's how I recharge, so I can come back and have the energy for another day on a set that can be quite intense. So I think that's very important.
Well, I think like any film or any television that we watch, it's a kind of a form of escapism, and it's a world that we don't get to enjoy or invest in our own lives. So looking back into what was a different world, we can lose ourselves in that, and also I think the cinematographers can have a lot of fun with designing the place, because in our history there's a lot of beauty.
Well, I've just finished a big drama, come out on the BBC, Mother, Father, Son, with Richard Gere and Sarah Lancashire. That is going to be on your screens also the beginning of March. Mother, Father, Son's an amazing psycho thriller about a family and about corruption in politics and the media, and Richard Gere's phenomenal.
Yeah, oh God, I don't know. I don't think I look maybe like a leading man. I look about 11 years old, but yeah, no, it certainly has helped, and yeah, it's really cool to go on and to be playing the lead in this next film. I'm really excited.
I'm hoping people will walk out with the power of a love story, but also with the universal message of reconciliation, compassion, and forgiveness. And we all in our lives will have an own personal aftermath of our own, whether it's the loss of our parents or some tragedy. And this is a lesson that actually, give it time, walk towards anybody who's close to you, and you will find the support and succor that you need in order to move on in your life.
Well, I hope that I think it's a film about redemption. I think it's a film about building bridges. I think that it's a very grown-up film. I think it's about a very grown-up love story. I think it's about the possibility of forgiveness. I think it has a lot of hope in it, but probably you're going to cry along the way.
Will we be all right? Everything can start again.
Thank you for watching The Fan Carpet. If you like this video, be sure to click that thumbs up button at the bottom of your screen. And also be sure to subscribe to the Fan Carpet YouTube channels. They're absolutely free and so much fun too. Be sure to check out the official website, thefancarpet.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date with reviews, competitions, the latest news, and so much more.